Marx and Satan, author Richard Wurmbrand exposes the truth about the man most credited with the communist idea. Marx began his life as a professing Christian, even writing a poem titled The Union of the Faithful with Christ in favor of Christianity. But by the time he finished high school, somehow his heart had turned. In another poem he wrote, "I wish to avenge myself against the one who rules above." In a poem titled Pale Maiden, Marx wrote, "Thus heaven I forfeited, I know it full well, my soul once true to God is chosen for hell." But Marx was not alone in his thoughts of damnation. He surrounded himself with like-minded fellows at the Internationale, a working man's association with a secret agenda. French historian E. Freiberg wrote, "The Internationale everywhere found support in Freemasonry," while author William T. Still writes that the Internationale can hardly be viewed as anything but Illuminized Masonry in a new disguise. Among Marx's comrades were men like Mikhail Bakunin, who wrote, "The evil one is the satanic revolt against divine authority. Satan, the eternal rebel, the first free thinker and the emancipator of worlds." Or Heinrich Heine, called the intimate friend of Marx, who wrote, "I called the devil and he came, his face with wonder I must scan. He is not ugly, he is not lame, he is a delightful, charming man." Wurmbrand writes that Marx and his comrades, while anti-God, were not atheists as present-day Marxists claim to be. That is, while they openly denounced and reviled God, they hated a God in whom they believed. When the revolution broke out in Paris in 1871, the Communard Florins declared, "Our enemy is God. Hatred of God is the beginning of wisdom." Marx greatly praised the Communards, who openly proclaimed this aim. Such was the thinking of the men whose influence would change the world through communism. As Nesta Webster wrote, the Internationale became simply an engine of warfare against civilization. Just as the Jacobin Club had openly executed the hidden plan of the Illuminati, the Internationale, holding within it the same terrible secrets, carried on the work of world revolution. This revolution would next enter into Russia to overthrow Tsar Nicholas II and his family, who were brutally murdered on July 17, 1918. As with the French Revolution, the powers that took over were far more bloodthirsty and cruel than any monarch in Russia's history. The two chief instruments, Lenin and Trotsky, inspired a civil war that cost 28 million Russian lives. When Joseph Stalin inherited Lenin's legacy, he would be called the most dictatorial and murderous tyrant the world had ever known. His own daughter said of him, quote, "A terrible demon had taken possession of my father's soul." It is now estimated by Soviet sources that Stalin's reign of terror killed 40 million Russians, a far greater death toll than what is so often attributed to Adolf Hitler. Sources claim that Europeans and Americans financed Lenin and Trotsky in their attempts to foment a revolution in Russia. Many have seen in this a global conspiracy. Among them was a young Winston Churchill, who made this statement where he tied it all together in a London newspaper in 1920. He said, "From the days of Spartacus Weishaupt to those of Karl Marx to those of Trotsky, this worldwide conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization has been steadily growing. It played a definitely recognizable role in the tragedy of the French Revolution. It has been the mainspring of every subversive movement during the 19th century. And now, at last, this band of extraordinary personalities from the underworld of the great cities of Europe and America have gripped the Russian people by the hair of their heads and have become practically the undisputed masters of that enormous empire." Yet in 1945, Churchill would be among the three leaders at the infamous meeting at Yalta, an historic event that many argue was a gigantic push for the New World Order. The Soviet Union, under the bloody leadership of Joseph Stalin, was given power over half of Europe, a decision that would later lead to the murder of countless millions. It is said this was largely due to the efforts of Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Reverend Jim Shaw, a former 33rd degree Mason who left the order and wrote his book titled The Deadly Deception, was interviewed by a reporter in 1989. We read that, concerning the famous picture at the Yalta Conference, Reverend Shaw said, and there they were, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, all three Masons. Some may suggest that Yalta was simply the poor judgment of men who did not realize what they were doing. But is it possible that a much greater agenda was at work?
E muitas vezes, pela própria luta armada, empunhando a sua espada, nós, democraticamente, criamos mais do que a Grande Colômbia, criamos hoje a grande nação sul-americana. Esse é um feito extraordinário para mim. É um feito que, possivelmente,